We now present A Midsummer Night's Dream, written by William Shakespeare. First, let us consider a few points that will enrich the listening experience. Written for the commercial stage of Elizabethan England in the 1590s, A Midsummer Night's Dream blends classical Athens, English folklore, courtly romance, and popular comedy. This prose retelling preserves the play's central movement from civic constraint into a moonlit forest where desire, identity, and judgment become unstable. Listen for contrasts between law and imagination, waking and dreaming, loyalty and impulse, and human seriousness and fairy mischief. The shifting pairs of lovers are easiest to follow by remembering that Hermia loves Lysander, Helena loves Demetrius, and magic temporarily disorders those bonds. We will now begin the reading. A Midsummer Night's Dream. There was a law in the city of Athens which gave its citizens the power of compelling their daughters to marry whomsoever they pleased. For, upon a daughter's refusing to marry the man her father had chosen to be her husband, the father was empowered by this law to cause her to be put to death. But as fathers do not often desire the death of their own daughters, even though they do happen to prove a little refractory, this law was seldom or never put into execution. Though perhaps the young ladies of that city were not unfrequently threatened by their parents with its terrors. There was one instance, however, in which an old man, whose name was Aegeus, actually did come before Theseus, at that time the reigning Duke of Athens, to complain that his daughter Hermia, whom he had commanded to marry Demetrius, a young man of a noble Athenian family, refused to obey him because she loved another young Athenian named Lysander. Aegeus demanded justice of Theseus and desired that this cruel law might be put in force against his daughter. Hermia pleaded, in excuse for her disobedience, that Demetrius had formerly professed love for her dear friend Helena, and that Helena loved Demetrius to distraction. But this honorable reason, which Hermia gave for not obeying her father's command, moved not the stern Aegeus. Theseus, though a great and merciful prince, had no power to alter the laws of his country. Therefore, he could only give Hermia 4 days to consider of it, and at the end of that time, if she still refused to marry Demetrius, she was to be put to death. When Hermia was dismissed from the presence of the Duke, she went to her lover Lysander and told him of the peril she was in, and that she must either give him up and marry Demetrius or lose her life in 4 days. Lysander was in great affliction at hearing these evil tidings. But recollecting that he had an aunt who lived at some distance from Athens, and that at the place where she lived the cruel law could not be put in force against Hermia, this law not extending beyond the boundaries of the city, he proposed to Hermia that she should steal out of her father's house that night and go with him to his aunt's house, where he would marry her. "I will meet you," said Lysander, "in the wood a few miles without the city, in that delightful wood where we have so often walked with Helena in the pleasant month of May." To this proposal Hermia joyfully agreed, and she told no one of her intended flight but her friend Helena. Helena, as maidens will do foolish things for love, very ungenerously resolved to go and tell this to Demetrius. Though she could hope for no benefit from betraying her friend's secret, but the poor pleasure of following her faithless lover to the wood. for she well knew that Demetrius would go thither in pursuit of Hermia. The wood in which Lysander and Hermia proposed to meet was the favorite haunt of those little beings known by the name of fairies. Oberon, the king, and Titania, the queen of the fairies, with all their tiny train of followers, held their midnight revels in this wood. Between this little king and queen of sprites, there happened at this time a sad disagreement. They never met by moonlight in the shady walks of this pleasant wood, but they were quarreling, until all their fairy elves would creep into acorn cups and hide themselves for fear. The cause of this unhappy disagreement was Titania's refusal to give Oberon a little changeling boy whose mother had been Titania's friend. Upon her death, the fairy queen stole the child from its nurse and brought him up in the woods. On the night when the lovers were to meet in this wood, Titania, walking with some of her maids of honor, met Oberon, attended by his train of fairy courtiers. "Ill met by moonlight, proud Titania," said the fairy king. The queen replied, "What, jealous Oberon, is it you? Fairies, skip hence. I have forsworn his company." "Tarry, rash fairy," said Oberon. "I'm not I thy lord?" Why does Titania cross her Oberon? "Give me your little changeling boy to be my page." "Set your heart at rest," answered the queen. "Your whole fairy kingdom buys not the boy of me." She then left her lord in great anger. "Well, go your way," said Oberon. "Before the morning dawns, I will torment you for this injury." Oberon then sent for Puck, his chief favorite and privy counselor. Puck, or as he was sometimes called, Robin Goodfellow, was a shrewd and knavish sprite who used to play comical pranks in the neighboring villages, sometimes getting into the dairies and skimming the milk, sometimes plunging his light and airy form into the butter churn. While he was dancing his fantastic shape in the churn, the dairymaid would labor in vain to change her cream into butter. Nor had the village swains any better success. Whenever Puck chose to play his freaks in the brewing copper, the ale was sure to be spoiled. When a few good neighbors met to drink some comfortable ale together, Puck would jump into the bowl of ale in the likeness of a roasted crab. And when some old goody was going to drink, he would bob against her lips and spill the ale over her withered chin. Presently afterwards, when the same old dame was gravely seating herself to tell her neighbors a sad and melancholy story, Puck would slip her three-legged stool from under her, and down toppled the poor old woman. Then the old gossips would hold their sides and laugh at her, and swear they never wasted a merrier hour. "Come hither, Puck," said Oberon to this little merry wanderer of the night. "Fetch me the flower which maids call love in idleness." The juice of that little purple flower, laid on the eyelids of those who sleep, will make them, when they awake, dote on the first thing they see. Some of the juice of that flower I will drop on the eyelids of my Titania when she is asleep, and the first thing she looks upon when she opens her eyes, she will fall in love with, even though it be a lion or a bear, a meddling monkey or a busy ape. Before I take this charm from off her sight, which I can do with another charm I know of, I will make her give me that boy to be my page. Puck, who loved mischief with all his heart, was highly diverted by this intended frolic of his master, and ran to seek the flower. While Oberon was waiting for Puck's return, he observed Demetrius and Helena enter the wood. He overheard Demetrius reproaching Helena for following him, and after many unkind words on his part and gentle expostulations from Helena, reminding him of his former love and professions of true faith to her, he left her, as he said, to the mercy of the wild beasts. And she ran after him as swiftly as she could. The Fairy King, who was always friendly to true lovers, felt great compassion for Helena. And perhaps, as Lysander said they used to walk by moonlight in this pleasant wood, Oberon might have seen Helena in those happy times when she was beloved by Demetrius. However that might be, when Puck returned with the little purple flower, Oberon said to his favorite, "Take a part of this flower. There has been a sweet Athenian lady here who is in love with a disdainful youth. If you find him sleeping, drop some of the love juice in his eyes, but contrive to do it when she is near him, so that the first thing he sees when he awakes may be this despised lady. You will know the man by the Athenian garments which he wears." Puck promised to manage this matter very dexterously, and then Oberon went, unperceived by Titania, to her bower, where she was preparing to go to rest. Her fairy bower was a bank where grew wild thyme, cowslips, and sweet violets, under a canopy of woodbine, musk roses, and eglantine. There Titania always slept for some part of the night. Her coverlet was the enameled skin of a snake, which, though a small mantle, was wide enough to wrap a fairy in. He found Titania giving orders to her fairies about how they were to employ themselves while she slept. "Some of you," said Her Majesty, "must kill cankers in the musk rose buds, and some wage war with the bats for their leathern wings, to make my small elves coats. And some of you keep watch that the clamorous owl, which nightly hoots, come not near me. But first, sing me to sleep." Then they began to sing this song: "You spotted snakes with double tongue, thorny hedgehogs, be not seen. Newts and blindworms, do no wrong. Come not near our fairy queen." Philomel, with melody, sing in our sweet lullaby. Lulla, lullaby, lulla, lullaby. Never harm, nor spell, nor charm, come our lovely lady nigh. So good night with lullaby. When the fairies had sung their queen asleep with this pretty lullaby, they left her to perform the important services she had enjoined upon them. Oberon then softly drew near his Titania, and dropped some of the love juice on her eyelids, saying, "What thou seest when thou wakest, do it for thy true love take." But to return to Hermia, who made her escape from her father's house that night to avoid the death to which she was doomed for refusing to marry Demetrius. When she entered the wood, she found her dear Lysander waiting for her to conduct her to his aunt's house. But before they had passed halfway through the wood, Hermia was so much fatigued that Lysander, who was very careful of this dear lady, who had proved her affection for him even by hazarding her life for his sake, persuaded her to rest until morning on a bank of soft moss. Lying down himself on the ground at some little distance, they soon fell fast asleep. Here they were found by Puck, who, seeing a handsome young man asleep and perceiving that his clothes were made in the Athenian fashion, and that a pretty lady was sleeping near him, concluded that this must be the Athenian maid and her disdainful lover, whom Oberon had sent him to seek. He naturally enough conjectured that, as they were alone together, she must be the first thing he would see when he awoke. So, without more ado, he proceeded to pour some of the juice of the little purple flower into his eyes. But it so fell out that Helena came that way, and instead of Hermia, was the first object Lysander beheld when he opened his eyes. Strange to relate, so powerful was the love charm that all his love for Hermia vanished away, and Lysander fell in love with Helena. Had he first seen Hermia when he awoke, the blunder Puck committed would have been of no consequence, for he could not love that faithful lady too well. But for poor Lysander to be forced by a fairy love charm to forget his own true Hermia, to run after another lady, and to leave Hermia asleep, quite alone in a wood at midnight, was a sad chance indeed. Thus this misfortune happened. Helena, as has been related before, endeavored to keep pace with Demetrius when he ran away so rudely from her. But she could not continue this unequal race for long, men being always better runners in a long race than ladies. Helena soon lost sight of Demetrius, and as she was wandering about, dejected and forlorn, she arrived at the place where Lysander was sleeping. Said she, "This is Lysander lying on the ground. Is he dead or asleep?" Then, gently touching him, she said, "Good sir, if you are alive, awake." Upon this, Lysander opened his eyes, and, the love charm beginning to work, immediately addressed her in terms of extravagant love and admiration, telling her that she excelled Hermia in beauty as much as a dove does a raven, and that he would run through fire for her sweet sake, with many more such lover-like speeches. Helena, knowing that Lysander was her friend Hermia's lover, and that he was solemnly engaged to marry her, was in the utmost rage when she heard herself addressed in this manner. For she thought, as well she might, that Lysander was making a jest of her. "Oh," said she, "why was I born to be mocked and scorned by everyone? Is it not enough, young man, that I can never get a sweet look or a kind word from Demetrius? Must you, sir, pretend in this disdainful manner to court me? I thought, Lysander, you were a lord of more true gentleness." Saying these words in great anger, she ran away, and Lysander followed her, quite forgetful of his own Hermia, who was still asleep. When Hermia awoke, she was in a sad fright at finding herself alone. She wandered about the wood, not knowing what had become of Lysander, or which way to go to seek him. In the meantime, Demetrius, unable to find Hermia and his rival Lysander, and fatigued by his fruitless search, was observed by Oberon fast asleep. Oberon had learnt, from some questions he had asked Puck, that he had applied the love charm to the wrong person's eyes. Now, having found the person first intended, he touched the eyelids of the sleeping Demetrius with the love juice, and Demetrius instantly awoke. As the first thing he saw was Helena, he, as Lysander had done before, began to address love speeches to her. Just at that moment, Lysander, followed by Hermia, for through Puck's unlucky mistake, it had now become Hermia's turn to run after her lover, made his appearance. Then Lysander and Demetrius, both speaking together, made love to Helena, each of them being under the influence of the same potent charm. The astonished Helena thought that Demetrius, Lysander, and her once dear friend Hermia were all in a plot together to make a jest of her. Hermia was as much surprised as Helena. She knew not why Lysander and Demetrius, who had both loved her before, had now become the lovers of Helena, and to Hermia the matter seemed to be no jest. The ladies, who before had always been the dearest of friends, now fell to high words together. "Unkind Hermia," said Helena, "it is you who have set Lysander on to vex me with mock praises. And your other lover, Demetrius, who used almost to spurn me with his foot, have you not bid him call me goddess, nymph, rare, precious, and celestial? He would not speak thus to me, whom he hates, if you did not set him on to make a jest of me. Unkind Hermia, to join with men in scorning your poor friend. Have you forgotten our school-day friendship? How often, Hermia, have we two, sitting on one cushion, both singing one song, with our needles working the same flower, both wrought upon the same sampler, growing up together in the fashion of a double cherry, scarcely seeming parted. Hermia, it is not friendly in you, it is not maidenly to join with men in scorning your poor friend." "I am amazed at your passionate words," said Hermia. "I scorn you not. It seems you scorn me." "I do," returned Helena. "Persevere, counterfeit serious looks, and make mouths at me when I turn my back, then wink at each other and keep the sweet jest going. If you had any pity, grace, or manners, you would not use me thus." While Helena and Hermia were speaking these angry words to each other, Demetrius and Lysander left them to fight together in the wood for the love of Helena. When they found that the gentleman had left them, they departed, and once more wandered wearily in the wood in search of their lovers. As soon as they were gone, the Fairy King, who, with little Puck, had been listening to their quarrels, said to him, "This is your negligence, Puck, or did you do this willfully?" "Believe me, King of Shadows," answered Puck, "it was a mistake." "Did you not tell me I should know the man by his Athenian garments? However, I am not sorry this has happened, for I think their jangling makes excellent sport." "You heard," said Oberon, "that Demetrius and Lysander have gone to seek a convenient place to fight in. I command you to overhang the night with a thick fog, and lead these quarrelsome lovers so far astray in the dark that they shall not be able to find each other. Counterfeit each of their voices to the other, and with bitter taunts provoke them to follow you, while they think it is their rival's tongue they hear. See that you do this until they are so weary they can go no farther, and when you find they are asleep, drop the juice of this other flower into Lysander's eyes. When he awakes, he will forget his new love for Helena and return to his old passion for Hermia. Then the two fair ladies may each be happy with the man she loves, and they will think all that has passed a vexatious dream. About this quickly, Puck, and I will go and see what sweet love my Titania has found." Titania was still sleeping, and Oberon, seeing a clown near her who had lost his way in the wood and was likewise asleep, said, "This fellow shall be my Titania's true love." Clapping an ass's head over the clown's, he made it seem to fit him as well as if it had grown upon his own shoulders. Though Oberon fixed the ass's head on very gently, the act awakened the clown, and he rose, unconscious of what Oberon had done to him, and went towards the bower where the fairy queen slept. "Ah, what angel is that I see?" said Titania, opening her eyes as the juice of the little purple flower began to take effect. "Are you as wise as you are beautiful?" "Why, mistress," said the foolish clown, "if I have wit enough to find the way out of this wood, I have enough to serve my turn." "Out of the wood do not desire to go," said the enamored queen. "I am a spirit of no common rate. I love you. Go with me, and I will give you fairies to attend upon you." She then called 4 of her fairies. Their names were Peace Blossom, Cobweb, Moth, and Mustard Seed. "Attend," said the queen, "upon this sweet gentleman. Hop in his walks, and gambol in his sight. Feed him with grapes and apricots, and steal for him the honey bags from the bees." "Come, sit with me," said she to the clown, "and let me play with your amiable hairy cheeks, my beautiful ass, and kiss your fair large ears, my gentle joy." "Where is Peas Blossom?" said the ass-headed clown, not much regarding the fairy queen's courtship, but very proud of his new attendants. "Here, sir," said little Peas Blossom. "Scratch my head," said the clown. "Where is Cobweb?"
"Here, sir," said Cobweb.
"Good Mr. Cobweb," said the foolish clown, "kill me the red humble-bee on the top of that thistle yonder, and, good Mr. Cobweb, bring me the honey-bag." "Do not fret yourself too much in the action, Mr. Cobweb, and take care that the honey-bag does not break. I should be sorry to have you overflown with a honey-bag. Where is Mustard Seed?" "Here, sir," said Mustard Seed. "What is your will?" "Nothing," said the clown, "good Mr. Mustard Seed, but to help Mr. Peas Blossom to scratch. I must go to a barber's, Mr. Mustard Seed, for methinks I am marvelously hairy about the face." "My sweet love," said the queen, "what will you have to eat?" "I have a venturesome fairy who shall seek the squirrel's hoard and fetch you some new nuts." "I would rather have a handful of dried peas," said the clown, who, with his ass's head, had acquired an ass's appetite. "But I pray you, let none of your people disturb me, for I have a mind to sleep." "Sleep, then," said the queen, "and I will wind you in my arms. Oh, how I love you! How I dote upon you!" When the fairy king saw the clown sleeping in the arms of his queen, he advanced within her sight and reproached her for having lavished her favors upon an ass. This she could not deny, as the clown was then sleeping within her arms, with his ass's head crowned by her with flowers. When Oberon had teased her for some time, he again demanded the changeling boy. Ashamed of being discovered by her lord with her new favorite, she did not dare to refuse him. Oberon, having thus obtained the little boy he had so long wished for as his page, took pity on the disgraceful situation into which, by his merry contrivance, he had brought his Titania, and threw some of the juice of the other flower into her eyes. The fairy queen immediately recovered her senses and wondered at her late dotage, saying how she now loathed the sight of the strange monster. Oberon likewise took the ass's head from off the clevin and left him to finish his nap with his own fool's head upon his shoulders. Oberon and his Titania were now perfectly reconciled. He related to her the history of the lovers and their midnight quarrels, and she agreed to go with him and see the end of their adventures. The fairy king and queen found the lovers and their fair ladies at no great distance from each other, sleeping on a grass plot. For Puck, to make amends for his former mistake, had contrived, with the utmost diligence, to bring them all to the same spot, unknown to each other. He had carefully removed the charm from off the eyes of Lysander with the antidote the fairy king had given him. Hermia first awoke, and, finding her lost Lysander asleep so near her, looked at him and wondered at his strange inconstancy. Lysander presently opened his eyes, and, seeing his dear Hermia, recovered the reason which the fairy charm had before clouded, and, with his reason, his love for Hermia. They began to talk over the adventures of the night, doubting whether these things had really happened or whether they had both been dreaming the same bewildering dream. Helena and Demetrius were by this time awake, and a sweet sleep having quieted Helena's disturbed and angry spirits, she listened with delight to the professions of love which Demetrius still made to her, and which, to her surprise as well as her pleasure, she began to perceive were sincere. These fair, night-wandering ladies, now no longer rivals, became true friends once more. All the unkind words which had passed were forgiven, and they calmly consulted together about what was best to be done in their present situation. It was soon agreed that, as Demetrius had given up his pretensions to Hermia, he should endeavor to prevail upon her father to revoke the cruel sentence of death which had been passed against her. Demetrius was preparing to return to Athens for this friendly purpose, when they were surprised by the sight of Aegeus, Hermia's father, who came to the wood in pursuit of his runaway daughter. When Aegeus understood that Demetrius would not now marry his daughter, he no longer opposed her marriage to Lysander, but gave his consent that they should be wedded on the 4th day from that time, the same day on which Hermia had been condemned to lose her life. On that same day, Helena joyfully agreed to marry her beloved and now faithful Demetrius. The fairy king and queen, who were invisible spectators of this reconciliation, and now saw the happy ending of the lovers' history, brought about through the good offices of Oberon, received so much pleasure that these kind spirits resolved to celebrate the approaching nuptials with sports and revels throughout their fairy kingdom. And now, if any are offended by this story of fairies and their pranks, judging it incredible and strange, they have only to think that they have been asleep and dreaming, and that all these adventures were visions which they saw in their sleep. I hope none of my readers will be so unreasonable as to be offended by a pretty, harmless Midsummer Night's Dream. Now let us explore the work in greater depth. A Midsummer Night's Dream is a comedy in which Shakespeare makes imagination both the source of enchantment and an object of scrutiny. The play moves between court, forest, household, and stage, Yet its deepest movement occurs in the unstable passage from perception to belief. Dense emphasis on imagination helps illuminate how the drama grants fantasy genuine power without treating every vision as truth. Lovers misread one another, fairies alter affections, and actors attempt to embody what exceeds their skill. But these failures are not merely comic accidents. They expose how desire reshapes the world it claims simply to observe. Oser's concern with imagination, judgment, and belief sharpens this point. The play repeatedly asks how people decide what to trust when emotion, authority, memory, and spectacle compete. Its comedy depends on mistaken certainty, but its resolution does not abolish uncertainty. Instead, judgment is restored through a provisional willingness to live with what cannot be fully explained. Looking's account of translation and metamorphosis likewise clarifies the play's fascination with change. Bodies, loyalties, languages, and social roles are translated into unfamiliar forms, most famously when bottom becomes at once ridiculous and strangely privileged. Metamorphosis reveals identity not as a fixed essence, but as something vulnerable to performance, magic, desire, and interpretation. The mechanical's performance adds a closing irony. Their clumsy art succeeds because spectators provide the imaginative sympathy that the spectacle itself lacks. Wiles's study of marriage and the Elizabethan calendar places these transformations within structures of season, festivity, and social renewal. The marriages that conclude the comedy are therefore not private endings alone. They belong to a ceremonial ordering of time, in which disorder is ritually contained and converted into communal celebration. Yet Hendrix's analysis of race and empire complicates any easy account of harmony. The conflict over the Indian boy and the language surrounding possession, difference, and dominion show that the fairy world is not detached from histories of power. Its beauty is crossed by contest, appropriation, and unequal claims. Shakespeare's achievement lies in sustaining these tensions rather than resolving them into a single lesson. Dream, theater, and festivity liberate the imagination, but they also reveal its susceptibility to hierarchy and illusion. The play finally defends neither skepticism nor credulity in absolute terms. It invites audiences to recognize that belief requires judgment, that transformation can be both comic and coercive, and that harmony often rests on forces the celebration cannot entirely conceal. A Midsummer Night's Dream begins with a conflict that is anything but light. Hermia's father, Aegeus, invokes an Athenian law that gives him the power to determine whom she must marry, and her refusal exposes her to death. The severity of this opening matters because it establishes the social world as one in which affection is subordinated to authority. Hermia's love for Lysander is sincere, mutual, and morally intelligible, yet none of those qualities protects her. The law recognizes the father's command rather than the daughter's judgment. Theseus appears merciful in temperament, but he remains constrained by the legal order he governs. His decision to grant Hermia 4 days does not remove the threat, it merely delays it. The story therefore opens by asking whether a society can call itself orderly when its order violates the inward truth of those who live under it. Hermia's response is active rather than submissive. She chooses flight, accepting the danger of the forest over the certainty of coercion in Athens. Lysander's plan to marry her beyond the city's jurisdiction turns geography into a moral argument. Athens represents law, inheritance, paternal control, and public identity. The wood represents uncertainty, secrecy, metamorphosis, and the possibility of becoming different from what society has declared one must be. Yet the forest is not simply a place of freedom. It is also a place where intention loses command over consequence. Hermia and Lysander enter it to preserve their chosen love, but once inside, they become vulnerable to forces that neither understand nor respect human plans. Helena complicates the moral structure from the beginning. Her love for Demetrius is painfully faithful, but her betrayal of Hermia's confidence is selfish and unkind. She reveals the lover's plan, not because she expects Demetrius to love her in return, but because she wants the temporary privilege of following him. Her decision shows how unreturned love can deform judgment. Helena is not malicious in a settled sense. She is desperate, humiliated, and willing to accept emotional scraps. Her weakness is recognizable because it grows from a desire to matter to someone who has taught her that she does not. In this respect, the story does not divide its young characters into the simply loyal and the simply faithless. It presents love as a condition that can inspire courage, self-sacrifice, jealousy, betrayal, and self-contempt, sometimes within the same person. The quarrel between Oberon and Titania enlarges the theme of possessive desire. Their dispute over the changeling boy mirrors the conflict between Aegeus and Hermia. In both cases, a powerful figure treats another being as the object of a claim. Oberon wants the boy as his page. Titania refuses because of loyalty to the child's dead mother. Her resistance is rooted in memory, friendship, and care. Oberon's answer is not persuasion, but enchantment. He plans to humiliate Titania until she yields. The fairy plot may be comic in tone, yet its structure is coercive. Magic gives Oberon the power to manipulate perception itself, making desire an instrument of domination. The comedy does not erase this troubling fact. Instead, it allows laughter and discomfort to coexist. Puck embodies the energy that makes the forest unpredictable. He is playful, inventive, and indifferent to the human need for stability. His village pranks establish a world in which ordinary routines can be overturned by invisible interference. Milk will not churn, ale will be spoiled, stools will vanish, and solemnity will collapse into laughter. These episodes are more than decorative folklore. They prepare us for a universe where human beings are never as self-governing as they imagine. Puck's mischief exposes the fragility of dignity. A person may believe herself serious, rational, and composed, yet a small disturbance can reveal how quickly control becomes confusion. The love and idleness flower gives physical form to the story's central question: how much of love is chosen, and how much is a mysterious alteration of vision? The juice does not create a careful appreciation of another person's character. It produces immediate, absolute attachment to the first creature seen upon waking. Love becomes an optical event. This is comic because the enchanted lovers speak with extravagant certainty, while the audience knows their certainty has no trustworthy foundation. It is also unsettling because their language resembles ordinary romantic conviction. Lysander, under the spell, does not sound uncertain. He sounds more certain than ever. His sudden devotion to Helena reveals that intensity is not proof of truth. Puck's mistake is crucial because it turns a planned correction into multiplied disorder. Oberon intends to help Helena by redirecting Demetrius's love, but Puck enchants Lysander instead. The error arises from a vague description. The man can be recognized by his Athenian clothes. In a forest containing more than one Athenian man, the instruction is dangerously imprecise. The comedy thus depends not only on magic, but on failed communication. Oberon possesses supernatural power, yet even power cannot guarantee accuracy when knowledge is incomplete. The mistake also exposes the arrogance of attempting to manage other people's emotions. Once love is treated as something that can be adjusted from above, unintended consequences become inevitable. Lysander's enchanted pursuit of Helena is especially painful because it leaves Hermia alone and unprotected. She has risked her life for him, and the audience knows that his abandonment is not voluntary. That knowledge softens our judgment of him, but does not soften Hermia's experience. From her perspective, the impossible has happened. The man for whom she defied her father has vanished. The story is attentive to the emotional reality of betrayal, even when betrayal has an artificial cause. Magic explains the action, but it does not cancel the suffering. Helena's reaction to Lysander's declarations is one of the most psychologically persuasive parts of the tale. Because she has been repeatedly rejected by Demetrius, she cannot imagine that another man's praise might be sincere. She interprets admiration as mockery. Her self-image has become so damaged that kindness appears crueler than contempt. This reversal shows how humiliation alters perception. The enchanted men see Helena through a false excess of love, while Helena sees them through a false excess of suspicion. No one perceives clearly. The forest does not merely scramble romantic pairings, it dramatizes the instability of interpretation. When Demetrius is also enchanted, Helena receives the devotion she had wanted, but in a form she cannot accept. Both men praise her, and abundance becomes indistinguishable from ridicule. The scene is comic because the audience sees the absurd symmetry of two rivals suddenly changing their object of worship. Yet Helena's distress gives the comedy emotional depth. She believes Hermia has joined the men in a conspiracy against her. The friend she once trusted now seems to be the organizer of her humiliation. Helena's speech about their childhood bond, their shared cushion, song, needlework, and sampler recalls a unity deeper than romantic rivalry. The image of the double cherry suggests two distinct persons joined in growth. That memory makes the quarrel more painful because it shows what jealousy can destroy. Hermia, meanwhile, cannot understand why she has become invisible to the men who once competed for her. Her anger is not vanity alone. She is confronting a world in which the evidence of yesterday has lost all authority. The sudden reversal threatens her sense of reality. Helena thinks Hermia is mocking her. Hermia thinks Helena is scornful. Lysander and Demetrius treat their transformed feelings as unquestionable truth. The comedy reaches its sharpest point when every character has a coherent explanation of events, and every explanation is wrong. Their conflict reveals how quickly friendship collapses when people mistake interpretation for fact. Oberon's rebuke of Puck introduces a distinction between intended benevolence and irresponsible amusement. Oberon wants the confusion repaired, while Puck considers the lovers' quarreling excellent sport. Puck's response reminds us that suffering looks different to those who do not bear it. From a distance, disorder may appear entertaining. For the lovers, it is terrifying. This tension is central to theatrical comedy itself. Audiences laugh at confusion because they possess knowledge denied to the characters. The story quietly asks what makes such laughter harmless. The answer depends on eventual restoration. If the lovers remained broken, the same scenes would become cruel rather than comic. The fog that Puck spreads through the wood transforms the setting into a theater of disembodied voices. Lysander and Demetrius pursue imitations, believing they hear each other. Their masculine rivalry becomes literally directionless. They are ready to fight for Helena, but they cannot even locate the opponent they hate. The episode mocks the heroic language of romantic competition. Their aggression depends on illusion, and exhaustion finally succeeds where reason has failed. Sleep becomes a merciful suspension of error. Throughout the story, sleep is both vulnerability and cure. It opens the mind to enchantment, but it also allows enchantment to be removed. Titania's awakening before the ass-headed clown produces the tale's most memorable image of misdirected desire. The fairy queen, surrounded by natural beauty and endowed with supernatural dignity, becomes devoted to a figure whose transformed head makes him ridiculous. The contrast is deliberately extreme, but the clown's response adds another layer. He does not become spiritually elevated by Titania's love. He remains practical, hungry, sleepy, and absorbed in the services of the fairies. His requests for scratching, honey, and dried peas reduce the language of courtly romance to bodily appetite. Titania speaks in adoration. He asks for comfort. Their mismatch exposes the self-enclosed nature of infatuation. She loves an image created by enchantment, not the being before her. The ass's head is an apt symbol because it makes visible what folly usually hides. Human beings often appear rational while behaving absurdly. The clown's transformation simply gives outward form to inward limitation. Yet the comedy is not entirely contemptuous of him. He adapts cheerfully to the impossible situation. He is neither frightened by fairies nor overwhelmed by royal attention. His foolishness protects him from the anguish experienced by the lovers. They demand that desire makes sense. He accepts pleasure as it comes. In a world of unstable identity, the least self-conscious character is also the least tormented. Oberon's victory over Titania remains morally ambiguous. He obtains the changeling boy only after engineering her humiliation. Her surrender is not the result of free agreement, but of shame. The subsequent reconciliation restores harmony, yet it does not undo the unequal method by which harmony was achieved. This tension prevents the fairy world from functioning as a purely benevolent alternative to Athens. Both realms contain hierarchy, possession, and coercion. The difference is that fairy power acts through imagination and bodily transformation, whereas Athenian power acts through law. The story connects them by showing that domination can wear either a legal or magical face. At the same time, Oberon does show pity. Once he has gained what he wants, he releases Titania from the spell and removes the ass's head from the clown. His compassion is imperfect because it follows success, but it matters to the movement of the plot. Comedy requires power to become restorative after it has been disruptive. Oberon shifts from avenger to healer, and Puck shifts from careless mischief maker to diligent repairer. Their change does not erase responsibility, but it allows the night to move toward dawn. The restoration of Lysander's love for Hermia raises a subtle question about authenticity. His original affection returns when the charm is removed, suggesting that true love is the stable condition beneath magical distortion. Demetrius, however, continues to love Helena after his enchantment, and the story treats that love as sincere. This asymmetry complicates any easy distinction between natural and artificial feeling. If Lysander's spell must be reversed, why is Demetrius's allowed to remain? One possible answer is that the enchantment restores an earlier attachment that Demetrius had abandoned. Another is that comedy values the final social harmony more than philosophical consistency. The unresolved discomfort is productive. It reminds us that happy arrangements may depend on forces the characters cannot fully examine. When the lovers awaken, they describe the night as dreamlike, because ordinary language cannot account for what happened. Dream becomes a bridge between experience and disbelief. Something can be emotionally real, even when it cannot be rationally organized. Hermia has felt abandonment. Helena has felt persecution, and the men have felt absolute passions that vanished or changed. Calling the night a dream does not make those feelings unreal. It gives the characters a way to continue living without mastering every cause. Aegeus's arrival brings the authority of Athens into the transformed space of the wood. Yet he finds a situation no longer compatible with his original demand. Demetrius has relinquished Hermia, Lysander has returned to her, and Helena's long desire appears answered. Aegeus's consent seems sudden, especially after the extremity of his earlier threat. That suddenness reflects the logic of comedy, where obstacles often dissolve once the proper pairings become visible. Still, the change is significant. The same father who treated Hermia as subject to his will now accepts her chosen marriage. The forest has altered not only the lovers, but the conditions under which authority acts. The approach of marriage gathers private desire into public recognition. Hermia and Lysander no longer need to flee beyond the law. Helena no longer needs to pursue a man who rejects her. The couples can return to Athens with their relationships acknowledged. Comedy traditionally ends by reintegrating characters into society, but this story makes reintegration possible only after society has been challenged by the forest. The night of confusion becomes the hidden condition of daylight order. The friendship between Hermia and Helena also requires restoration. Their quarrel reveals that romantic competition can turn women against each other, but their reconciliation suggests that friendship can survive words spoken under pressure. The narrative does not dwell on apology, yet it emphasizes forgiveness. This is consistent with the dream framework. The characters treat the knight's cruelty as something both experienced and suspended, remembered and released. Forgiveness becomes a form of waking. The final invitation to regard the story as a dream shapes the reader's relation to everything that has occurred. It does not simply excuse improbability. It proposes imagination as a space in which serious conflicts can be rearranged without being denied. The threat of forced marriage, the pain of rejection, the fragility of friendship, and the abuse of power all remain present, but they are transformed by fairy comedy. Dream allows the mind to approach anxieties indirectly. It makes room for terror, desire, and absurdity to share the same landscape. The prose retelling intensifies this effect by guiding the reader through the confusion with a clear narrative voice. The original play's rapid dialogue, theatrical entrances, and overlapping perspectives become a flowing story suited to listening. The narrator frequently explains motives and consequences, helping the audience follow the shifting affections. This clarity does not eliminate ambiguity. Rather, it makes the moral pattern easier to hear. Authority creates the first crisis. Love drives the characters into danger. Imagination disorders their identities, and mercy permits a return. Listening to the tale also reveals how often sound governs action. Helena follows Demetrius's words. The lovers quarrel through declarations. The fairies sing Titania to sleep, and Puck imitates voices in the fog. Speech creates bonds and breaks them. A profession of love may be true, enchanted, manipulative, or misunderstood. The ear, like the eye, is vulnerable. In the forest, characters trust what they hear and see, yet both senses are unreliable. The story's dream logic emerges through this collapse of perception. What finally makes A Midsummer Night's Dream enduring is its refusal to reduce love to a single moral. Love is courageous when Hermia risks everything for Lysander. It is degrading when Helena pursues Demetrius despite his cruelty. It is possessive when Oberon demands the changeling. It is ridiculous when Titania adores the ass-headed clown. It is restorative when estranged friends and lovers return to one another. The same force can ennoble and bewilder. The story does not solve love so much as stage its contradictions. Its comedy likewise depends on a delicate balance. We laugh because mistakes multiply with elegant symmetry, because proud figures become foolish, and because language outruns reality. Yet beneath the laughter lies a serious recognition that identity is unstable and power is dangerous. A person may wake loving someone else. A queen may embrace an ass. A father may invoke death in the name of order. And a friend may become an enemy through misunderstanding. The happy movement toward reconciliation matters because the world revealed by the night is not harmless. The tale's deepest wisdom may be that human beings need both judgment and imagination. Judgment without imagination becomes Aegeus's rigid law, incapable of seeing Hermia as a person with inward claims. Imagination without judgment becomes Puck's mischief or the flower's blind infatuation, delighting in transformation without attending to consequence. The work seeks a middle ground where imagination loosens oppressive certainty and judgment restores proportion. The forest breaks the fixed arrangements of Athens, but dawn must still gather the fragments into a livable order. For that reason, the ending feels less like a denial of the night's confusion than a temporary settlement with it. The characters return to ordinary life, carrying experiences they cannot fully explain. Their happiness depends partly on forgetting, partly on forgiveness, and partly on accepting that reason does not govern every decisive change. The reader, too, is asked to wake without dismissing the dream. What seemed impossible has exposed truths about law, desire, friendship, pride, and perception. The enchantment fades, but the questions remain.